Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, very good morning. We have discussed about what is meant by ERP, what is meant by SAP, what is meant by basis, and also roles and responsibilities of SAP basis. And also we discussed a few SAP advantages. And now we are moving to SAP architecture. So we call it as SAP three-tier architecture. Before discussing about SAP three-tier architecture, first of all, we need to know what is meant by SAP system. Okay, so SAP system means nothing but as a basis administrator, we have to install database software. We are installing a database software, so we can call it as a DB server. We can call it as a DB server, or we can call it as a DB instance. DB instance means nothing but database instance. So that means database server means nothing but we are going to be install a database software. Database software is used to store data. Data means nothing but group of tables. Okay, so we call this as DB server or DB instance. We are going to be install SAP software on top of this database software. And when we are going to be install SAP software, we used to get application server. That application server is also called as central instance. Here, database server is also called as a database instance. Application server is also called as central instance. So as a basis administrator, we have to install DB server. We have to install SAP software. When we install SAP software, we used to get application server. So this application server is used to handle the user request. We'll process the user request according to the user requirement. Okay. So the point is, as a basis administrator, we have to install DB server and application server, right? So we call this as SAP system. This is called as SAP system. Your DB server and your application server is called as SAP system. How you are going to be connected to your SAP system? By using SAP GUI. By using SAP GUI. GUI means graphical user interface. By using SAP graphical user interface, we are going to be connected to application server. We are going to be log on to your application server. So this application server will handle the user request and will process the user request according to the user requirement. So SAP GUI is an interface. Which is used to access your application server or which is used to log on to your application server. I will give an example for your SAP GUI. Okay, assume that this is your Netflix server. How you are going to be connected to your Netflix server? By using Netflix app. Assume that this is your Amazon Prime server. How you are going to be connected to your Amazon Prime server? By using Amazon Prime app. So your Netflix server, if you are going to be connected to your Netflix server, you need Netflix app. So Netflix app is nothing but an interface to log on to your Netflix server or to access your Netflix server. In the same way, Amazon Prime server. Assume that this is your Amazon Prime server. How you are going to be connected to Amazon Prime server? By using Amazon Prime app. Amazon Prime app is nothing but an interface which is used to access or which is used to log on to your Amazon Prime server. Assume that this is your IRCTC server. How you are going to be connected to IRCTC server? By using IRCTC app. IRCTC app is nothing but an interface which is used to access your to log on to your IRCTC server. In the same way, this is my SAP application server. How you are going to be connected to your SAP application server? By using SAP GUI app or SAP GUI interface. With this interface, we are going to be connected to your SAP application server. We are going to be log on with the username and password. Okay, this application server will handle that user, will process that user according to the user requirement. Okay, so your DB server and your application server is called as SAP system. Okay, and this entire part, your SAP GUI, your DB server, application server, all together is called as three-tier architecture. Three-tier architecture. I hope you understand what is the difference between SAP system and three-tier architecture. Your DB server and application server is called as SAP system. Okay, how you are going to be access to your application server? By using SAP GUI. So this entire part, SAP GUI, application server and DB server, entire is called as three-tier architecture. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Three-tier architecture. So now my concept is about three-tier architecture, user request to flow. How user is going to be access to SAP application server, how user is going to be connect, how user is going to be process the user request. That everything we are going to be discuss the user request flow. So this is my SAP three-tier architecture. So this is my DB server. I already conveyed about what is meant by DB server. DB server is nothing but where database software is installed, which is used to store data. Data means nothing but group of tables. And this is application server. Application server is used to handle the user requests which are coming from SAP GUI and will process the user request according to the user requirement. And coming to SAP GUI is nothing but an interface which is used to access, which is used to log on to your application server. How you are going to be log on to your application server from SAP GUI? By using username and password. We'll come to know what is that username and password. If user wants to log on if user wants to log on, username is Mahesh, assume that username is Mahesh and password is so and so. Password is so and so. User wants to log on, assume that Mahesh user is available in SAP system. Mahesh అనే యూజర్ SAP సిస్టమ్ లో క్రియేట్ అయి ఉంది అనుకున్నాం. ఓకే, ఇప్పుడు మహేష్ యూజర్ SAP సిస్టమ్ కి లాగిన్ అవుదాం అనుకుంటున్నాడు. ఎలా లాగిన్ అవుదాం అనుకుంటున్నాడు? బై యూజింగ్ SAP GUI. హౌ యూజర్ విల్ లాగ్ ఆన్ ఫ్రమ్ SAP GUI? So we need SAP application server details. We need to add application server details in SAP GUI. What are the details required to add in SAP GUI? We need computer name. Computer name means where my application server is installed, that computer name. ఓకే, ఈ మన SAP అప్లికేషన్ సర్వర్ ఇన్స్టలేషన్ అయింది కదా, ఆ అప్లికేషన్ సర్వర్ ఎక్కడైతే ఇన్స్టలేషన్ అయిందో ఆ కంప్యూటర్ నేమ్ ఏంటి? We need a computer name. In Windows, we call it as computer name, whereas in Linux, we call it as host name. We call it as host name. Okay, and we need a port number. We need instance number. We need all these inputs. We need all these inputs from application server. Assume that my application server installed on a computer name called, assume that the computer name is Mahesh S4HANA. This is my computer name. On this computer name, my application server is installed. Okay, and port number is your dispatcher port number, and that is 32 dispatcher port number. That is fixed. The port number is fixed, 32. And instance number. Your application server is also called as central instance kada. So while installation of your SAP application server, it will ask you to provide instance number. The instance number ranges from 00 to 99. It's a two-digit number. 98 and 99 are reserved by SAP. From 00 to 97, we can use any instance number during SAP application server installation. So whenever we are going to install the central instance or the application server, it will ask us to provide instance number. So the instance number ranges from 00 to 99. 98 and 99 are reserved by SAP. From 00 to 97, we can use any instance number during installation of your application server. In my case, I'm going with the default instance number, that is 00. I'm going with 00 instance number. So all these we need to add in SAP GUI. So why we are going to be add to SAP GUI? To connect it to this application server. If we have a details of application server and that details if we are going to be added to SAP GUI, then only we can connect it to application server. Once all these details are added in SAP GUI, now user is ready to access application server. Now user is ready to log on to application server with the username and password. Assume that this username is available in SAP system. Okay, now Mahesh user is connecting to SAP system with username and password. Okay, so user submits a request from SAP GUI. And the request is received by dispatcher. Now dispatcher will assign the user request to the freely available work processes. Dispatcher will assign the user request to the freely available work process. So we have work process here. Work processes means which is used to handle the user request, which is used to interact with the user request, which is used to communicate with the user request, and will process the user request according to the user requirement. Once the user request assigned to the work process, okay, once the dispatcher assigns the user request to the freely available work process, very important, freely available work process, okay, the work process will check username and password. If username and password is valid or not, it will check username and password is valid or not. It will check in user context. If username and password is valid, user will get into SAP system. User will log into SAP system. Okay, this is one way of logging. Another way of logging. User submits a request from SAP GUI and the request is received by dispatcher. Dispatcher will assign the user request to the freely available work process, right? But now the work process are busy. There are no freely available work process. All the work process are busy. In that case, dispatcher will keep the request in dispatcher wait queue. Dispatcher will keep the user request in dispatcher wait queue. So whenever the work process are free, the dispatcher will assign the user request to the freely available work process based on FIFO mechanism. Dispatcher will assign the user request to the freely available work process based on FIFO. FIFO means who came to queue first, they will go out first. First in, first out. Once the request assigned to the work process, so the work process will check username and password in user context. If username and password is valid, user will get into SAP system. Now user will get initial SAP screen. In that initial SAP screen, user has to execute transaction codes. So basis consultant, ABAP consultant, FICO consultant, HR consultant, whoever working in SAP system, they have to work with the transaction codes only. They have to work with SAP system in the form of transaction codes. We call it as T codes. Assume that we have a transaction code called SM50 and the output of SM50 transaction code is SM A plus B is equal to 10. For understanding purpose, I'm giving an example. Assume that we have a transaction code called SM50 and the SM50 output is A plus B is equal to 10. User is executing transaction code in application server. Okay, data is available in database server. A plus B is equal to 10. Data is available in database server. User is executing transaction code in application server. So whenever user log on to SAP system, user will get initial SAP screen, right? In that initial SAP screen, we have an option to execute transaction code. Now user is executing a transaction code called SM50. The SM50 output is A plus B is equal to 10, and the data is available in database level. Okay. Now user is executing a transaction code SM50. So to get the output screen, we are at initial SAP screen. To get the output screen, we need screen interpreter. This screen interpreter, whenever we execute transaction code, this screen interpreter will help you to change from initial SAP screen to output SAP screen. So we need output SAP screen of SM50, right? So this screen interpreter will change from initial SAP screen to output SAP screen. Okay. And for every transaction code, there is an ABAP program. For every transaction code, there is an ABAP program. To execute this ABAP program or to run this ABAP program, we need ABAP interpreter. ABAP interpreter is used to run the ABAP program. This is your ABAP interpreter, which is used to run the ABAP program of that respective transaction code. Every ABAP program is written in the language called SQL language. SQL language means it contains SQL statements, SQL queries. Okay, to execute that SQL queries, which are in ABAP program, we need SQL interpreter. SQL interpreter is used to read the SQL queries in the ABAP program, which is used to run the SQL queries in the web program and checks the user requested content in R3 buffer. It will check the user requested content in R3 buffer. What is meant by R3 buffer? R3 buffer is used to store frequently accessed data and rarely modified data. Rarely modified. Frequent గా యాక్సెస్ చేసుకునే డేటా అంటే ఎక్కువ యాక్సెస్ చేసుకునే డేటా, రేర్ గా మోడిఫైడ్ అంటే రేర్ గా అప్డేట్ చేసే డేటాను ఆర్టీ బఫర్లో స్టోర్ అవుతుంది అనమాట. So user came for the first time to SAP system and the transaction code user is executing for the first time. The user requested content data is not available in R3 buffer. If the user requested content data is not available in R3 buffer, then the user will go to database. Then the user request will go to database through DB client. User request will go to database through DB client. What is meant by DB client? So DB client is used to establish a connection between DB server and application server. If your database is Oracle database, then you have to use Oracle DB client in application server. If your database is MS SQL database, then we have to use MS SQL DB client in application server. If your database is HANA database, then we have to use HANA DB client in application server. So whatever the database software we are using, that respect to database client software we have to use in application server. Okay. Anyway, if the user request content is not available in R3 buffer, then the request will come to a database through DB client. Now user will fetch data. User will fetch data from database server and will bring the data back to application server. Stores in R3 buffer. That is A plus B is equal to 10. Stores in R3 buffer. Once it is stored, the response is given back to your user. The data will be displayed to user. So this is what the user request to flow of your SAP CTA architecture. Now one more explanation. Now there is one more user logging to SAP system and the username is Maithili user. Username is Maithili user and the password is so and so. Now Maithili user is connecting to SAP system with the username and password. User submits a request from SAP GUI. Request is received by dispatcher. Dispatcher will assign the user request to the freely available work process. Once the request assigned to the freely available work process will check username and password in user context. If username and password is valid, user will get into SAP system. Now, Maithili user also wants to know the output of SM50. Okay, whenever Maithili user executes a transaction code called SM50, the screen interpreter will help you to change from initial screen to output screen. And every transaction code is written in the every transaction code contains a program called ABAP program. To run that ABAP program, we need ABAP interpreter. Every ABAP program is written in the language called SQL language, where ABAP program contains SQL statements or SQL queries. To execute that SQL queries, we need a SQL interpreter. This SQL interpreter will read the SQL statements, SQL queries in ABAP program and checks the user requested content in R3 buffer. So the user requested content of SM50 is available in R3 buffer, that is A plus B is equal to 10, and it will pick the data from R3 buffer and will display the data to user. If the data is available in R3 buffer, then user will pick the data from R3 buffer. If the data is not available in R3 buffer, then the request will go to database through DB client and will fetch the data from database level and bring the data back to application server. So this is the user request flow of your SAP 3-tier architecture. Okay, now we can see the numbering to make you understand. Now we can see the numbering here. User request flow numbering. User submits the request from SAP GUI, first point. Second point, the request is received by dispatcher. Third point, dispatcher will keep the request and dispatcher wait queue when work process are busy. Fourth point, dispatcher will assign the user request to the freely available work process based on FIFO mechanism. Fifth point, work process will check username and password, and if username and password is valid, user will get into SAP system. Sixth point, whenever user executes a transaction code, the screen interpreter will help you to change from initial screen to SAP screen. Seventh point, every transaction code contains ABAP program. To run that ABAP program, we need ABAP interpreter. Eighth point, every ABAP program is written in the language called SQL language. To run the SQL queries in the ABAP program, we need SQL interpreter. And it will check the user request content in R3 buffer. That is 9th point. If the user content is not available in R3 buffer, then the request will go to database through DB client. 10th point. Fetching the data from our database. 11th point. Bringing the data back to database. 12th point. Storing the data and giving response back to user. So this is what the user request flow. Whatever the points I have mentioned till 14, all the points we have a description. For all the points, we have a description here in a general format, a technical format. So this is what the SAP 3-tier architecture user request flow. So let me know have any questions on this. Any questions?
No, sir.
Yes. So moving to next. So we all know that this is called as database instance. This is also called as central instance. Database server is called as a database instance. Application server is called as central instance. Okay. Now my topic is about types of instances. Coming to types of instances, we have database instance and we have central instance as discussed here. Okay. Now I will show you one more type of instance. Very important. Have an attention. We all know that as a basis administrator, we are going to be installed database server, also called as database instance. Also called as database instance. And also we are installing application server. Application server is also called as central instance, right? So this is called as a database instance. And this is called as central instance. Central instance. And this central instance is connected to your database instance. Okay. So this database instance and central instance will come through your SAP installation. Your database instance and your central instance will come through your SAP installation. Okay. And users will log on from SAP GUI. Okay. So number of users logging to your central instance. Okay. Over a period, what happens? There is a heavy load on your central instance. If there is a heavy load, the new user cannot log on to your central instance, cannot log on to your application server. Why? Because there is already a heavy load on your central instance. Now the new user is not able to log on. Why? Because central instance is handling heavy load. In that case, we can install one more instance. That instance is called as dialog instance. Dialog instance. Okay. Now, whatever we have discussed in central instance, dispatcher, work process, user context, all the interpreters, R3 buffer, DB client, same we have in dialog instance as well. Okay. So now users can connect from SAP GUI to this dialog instance. Okay. So number of users are connecting to this dialog instance. Okay. Over a period, both central instance and dialog instance both are heavily loaded. In that case, we can install one more instance. That instance is also called as dialog instance. And this instance is connected to your database server. Now users can log on to this dialog instance as well. So in types of instances, we have database instance, central instance. This database instance and central instance came through your SAP installation, and dialog instances we are going to be installed based on requirement. So we have three types of instances. Dialog instance. We already conveyed about database instance. Database instance means nothing but a database where a database software is installed and it is used to store data. Data means nothing but a group of tables, and it is used to fulfill the requests. It is used to fulfill the database instance is used to fulfill the requests which are coming from central instance or from dialog instance. That is what your database instance. Coming to central instance, it is used to handle and process the user request according to the user requirement, and there will be only one central instance for the entire SAP system. This is your SAP. This is your SAP system. There will be only one central instance. There will be only one central instance, and that is came through your SAP installation. You can install n number of dialog instances. Same point for your dialog instance as well. Same point. It is also used to handle and process the user request. But if you have more than one instance, we can do load balancing. If we have more than one instance, some users will log on to this instance, some users will log on to this instance, some users will log on to this instance, load balancing will be happened. So this is about your types of instances. So we have central instance, data instance, and also database instance. Yeah, any questions? Any questions?
No, sir. No, sir.
Yeah. Now, my next topic is about work process. We all know that this is my DB server. This is my application server. An application server is connected to my database. Okay. And this is called as a database server or database instance. And this is called as application server or central instance. Okay. And here we have a dispatcher. We all know that we have a dispatcher here. And here we have work process. W0, W1, W2, so on, Wn-1. And here we have a SAP GUI. SAP GUI. Users will log on from SAP GUI. So that means user will submit the request from SAP GUI. And the request will be received by dispatcher. And dispatcher will assign the user request to the freely available work process. So now my topic is about work process. Topic is about work process. First point of work process. First point of work process. Work processes are used to handle and process user request according to user requirement. This is first point. Work processes are used to handle and process the user request according to the user requirement. This is first point. Coming to second point. There are various types of work processes used for various purposes. That means there are different types of work process used for different purposes. Third point. Third point. The instance name is identified by the work processes. The instance name is identified by the work processes. So the instance name is your central instance name, DVEBMGS plus instance number. This 00 instance number which we have given during SAP application server installation. During central instance installation, it will ask us to provide instance number, right? That instance number is this. If you provide 10, we used to get 10. If you provide 40, we used to get 40. If you provide 55, we used to get 55. Okay, I have given 00, I got 00 at the end. And this is your instance name, DVEBMGS plus your instance number. This instance name is called as the central instance name. The central instance name is identified by the work process. So this is your central instance name. And your dialog instance name. When you install dialog instance, and the dialog instance name you will get in this way. Your dialog instance name is this. D plus instance number what you have given during dialog instance installation. D plus instance number. When you install one more dialog instance, you will get D02. Whatever the instance number you have given, that instance number will come along with D plus your instance number. So this is your central instance name. This is your dialog instance naming convention. This is your one more dialog instance. naming convention. Now you can see work processes are used to handle and process the user request according to the user requirement. There are various types of work processes in the instance used for various purposes. The instance name is identified by the processes. So these are the processes. The instance name is identified by the processes. These are the processes: dialog work process, update work process, enqueue work process, background work process, message server, gateway server, and spool work process. If you see the name like this, so we can call it as central instance. If you see the name like this, we can call it as dialog instance. So this is about your work process. Actually, I have mentioned the work process are W011, right? Okay, actually the work process are not W011. Okay, your central instance name is DVEBMGS plus instance number. This is your central instance name, right? Okay, then your work processes are, D for dialog work process, V for update work process, E for enqueue work process, B for background work process, M for message server, G for gateway server, and S for spool work process. Actually, these are the work process in your application server. They are not W011. They are D, V, E, B, M, G, S. Okay, if I mention in the architecture session, I mentioned W011, W2, right? Instead of W011, if I mention D, V, E, B, M, G, yes, if I mention like this, what happens? You'll ask, sir, what is D? What is V? What is E? So this is not the right time to discuss about work process, right? So now this is the right time. When the topic comes, that is the right time where to discuss about work process. So these are the work process. Whenever user log on from SAP GUI, the request is received by dispatcher, right? Whenever user submits a request, the request is received by dispatcher, right? Dispatcher will assign the user request to the freely available work process I told, right? So out of all these work process, which work process will receive the user request first? So we have a question mark. This is about your SAP 3D architecture, and also we have discussed about what is meant by work process. Okay, still we need to discuss about what is dialog, what is enqueue, what is update work process, what is background work process, what is message gateway and spool work process. So let me know have any questions.
No, sir. No.
So thank you so much. Have a nice day.